Hey guys, TJ Schwarz here, coming at you from a little wooded area by the Payette River just down the road from our shop here. This nice quiet area is a great place to shoot video, I think, because our shop is never quiet anymore. It's been a deterrent for me filming in recent months. And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go outside. There's gonna be some birds and stuff, but it's a lot quieter than, you know, a tumbler and a CNC machine running behind me. So hope you guys enjoy. I wanna talk today about the Lost Trail 5, or LT5 for short. This is our newest model, and it marks in some ways a departure from other things we've been doing in the past. Doesn't mean we're not doing that stuff anymore. It just means we've got a new family here. It's a family of one, but we want to keep expanding it. We made some different decisions here, and I want to go over why and how we did that. The LT5 is a camp knife. That's sort of the genre I would call this knife. It's what I would call a middle of the road size for that application. There are bigger camp knives and there are smaller camp knives. This is a really nice all around, what I would consider possibly a one knife solution in the camping application. And that is because it can baton, it can do whittling, it can do light chopping. For example, if I'm trying to set up a tent right here where I'm sitting, I got branches all over me, I've got branches on the ground. If I needed to do some, chopping to clear an area, I could use it. If I want to make some tent stakes, I can do it. And then particularly with batoning, the blade shape has this flat upper spine, which stays flat towards the tip, which allows the batoning with the full length of the blade, leaving only a small amount of tip for striking to drive it through, because it's not dropping rapidly as it reaches the tip. If you've ever batoned with a knife like that before, you'll know that you get a skip effect where you're trying to hit the tip to drive it through and it's skipping off of it. So that would be the reason for that blade shape. So all around, a camping knife. If you just want to have it in the truck, if you want to have it in your go bag, if you want to be able to do pretty much anything around camp, that's what we were trying to do with this knife. So first off, this is a much bigger knife than anything we've made. It is not insanely thick. I'm not a fan of super insanely thick knives. It is 5/32 thick on the tang. The handle is a very full handful. We did go very robust and girthy on the handle here, so it is a handful knife. But the tang itself is not overly thick. But other than that, the actual profile, like the silhouette of this knife, is quite large. And that is done for many reasons given the use case for this knife. And but the real departure here, in a lot of ways, is the material selection. So we went with A2 tool steel. And a lot of people say, oh, you make so many knives out of MagnaCut, like I would have expected MagnaCut. Well, I love MagnaCut. We use MagnaCut in everything we've made so far. In fact, that's the only steel we've been using for quite a while. No reason to go away from it. We've had good luck, and we'll continue to do that. But this knife has a little bit different use case and a little different idea behind it. I'm a fan of A2 because one of the reasons is because the very first knife I ever designed was A2 tool steel. This is 12 years ago or so. And I was impressed with it at that time, and I still am. I like a good carbon steel. I like it coated for rust prevention, so that's why all of these are Cerakoted. Obviously, carbon steel has the disadvantage of the possibility of rust, much higher so than a high stainless like MagnaCut. So again, Cerakote on this A2 gives you that corrosion prevention. But one of the main reasons I like A2 is it has a very flat curve in toughness when you get into the higher hardnesses, not super high, but this knife we're taking to 62 to 63 Rockwell. That's quite a bit higher than a lot of other carbon steel knives you're going to see out there, and I think the data supports that A2 has a very sustainable hardness or toughness level into those high hardnesses, and our data in our testing really proved that out. So we took 15 of these knives and we took them to our heat treater and we had them take it to max hardness. So basically put them in the oven, quench them, and then test one and see where they're at. So all 15 started out 66 Rockwell. Then we had them start to temper them down sequentially, just in small segments, with the temperature increasing actually on the temperature for the temper, which lowers the hardness as you go higher in temper. And so they pulled one knife out each time they walk the hardness down, thus giving us this array of knives that have the varying hardness. And so we tested this knife all the way above 64 Rockwell, all the way down to 59 Rockwell. And in doing that testing, not by looking at spreadsheets or data, but by actually using the knife in the given geometry that we have here, we were able to deduce where the sweet spot for us was in that hardness range. And it ended up being higher than I expected. It ended up being 62, 63 Rockwell was what we felt the best range. And it was certainly higher than I was expecting. And I've actually been blown away by the performance we've gotten out of this A2. One thing I'll point out is you do see a lot of custom makers taking A2 to these higher hardnesses. I've seen other YouTube videos. I've watched all the videos and read all the articles I could about A2 as we launched this. And it was pretty obvious to me that in the manufacturing space, a lot of knives, in particular carbon steels, are 56 to sometimes as much as 60 absolute tops in the hardness. But in the custom space, you do see that higher hardness, particularly on A2, like up to 62 Rockwell. And so this does track with what we're seeing in what a lot of the custom makers are finding with their testing. So this is A2. It's an old steel. It's a 100-year-old steel, in fact, but it's quite a bit different than some of the A2 that you're going to find on the market. So we're very happy with the performance. We beat on it. It's crazy how hard it is to get A2 to chip if it's properly heat treated at 62. We also do a cryo treatment, partly to get that hardness, but also to increase toughness. And man, I'm really happy with the A2 selection. So if you guys pick one of these up, don't be afraid. It's not MagnaCut. It is a 100-year-old steel, but it's got 21st century heat treat, and we are super happy with it. Now, moving on from that, we've got Richlite handle scales. Richlite is a recycled paper material. It is very durable, but what I like about it is the sort of soft touch aspect of it. The Richlite has this feel, I mean, it's paper, it's recycled paper products, and so it has just this supple like warmth to it that a lot of people like about micarta, without quite the degree of porosity and like absorption that you get with micarta. So you get that warm feeling and also just a super nice, even, and here we're getting a little bit of sunlight coming through the trees, so I don't know how well that's going to look, but it's just a nice, even black, like a matte black. Like it almost looks kind of plasti dipped or like spray painted. It's just so even, but it is just solid material. There's no coating on it or anything. And so we went with that partly because the thickness of this handle is something that I wanted to have just right. And the tang is relatively thin, 5/32 thick for a knife this size is not overly thick. But I found that if I was limited to 3/8 thickness for material for the scales, which is kind of a common limitation for a lot of materials across the board is about 3/8, I found that I didn't like it. It wasn't quite thick enough for my hand. And Richlite is one of the few materials that's readily available in 1/2 inch and much higher thicknesses. And so that was one of the things about the Richlite that we really liked. It was just the allowance for us to have these materials in different colors available in this much thickness, partly to compensate for the tang not being that thick, but also just so that you have that really just solid grip. So Richlite, love it, guys, just that feel. I'm sure we'll eventually do some other handle materials on this, but this is sort of our base standard, which we are super happy with. In this knife, we also have a striker pommel, a hammer there. And so that's for, tent stakes or what have you. If you need to hammer with the back of the knife, you have that exposure. You can also scrape with it, which I have done. It does have a 90-degree spine on the entire perimeter. This knife is never tumbled. So a lot of knives do have a 90-degree spine, but they're also tumbled, so you get a little bit of an edge break. So if you're going to scrape or strike a ferro rod, this was 90 degrees off the machine. It was CNC, it was heat treated, and then it was Cerakoted. So there is nothing that's ever broken this 90-degree edge, and the scales are perfectly flush with that tang, so you don't have any of that 90-degree feel in your palm, but you have it out here for scraping and ferro rod striking. So I've talked quite a bit about the knife, and there's a lot more information to be learned about this. We will continue to have content out there. There's a website page where you can buy one today, and you can see a lot of the specs in addition to what I've stated here. But I wanted to talk also real quick about the sheath. I think a sheath is paramount for a quality fixed blade, because if you can't really carry it, or if you can carry it but it's just a little bit awkward, that I found is such a friction point and deterrent from being the knife that you grab when you go out in the woods. The one that you feel good about the sheath on, for me, is the one that I tend to grab. So we spent a lot of time on this sheath. This sheath is, in this case, OD green Kydex. We have a couple different colors. But one of the main things we did a little bit differently is we have a stainless steel drop rig assembly there. We have high quality veg tan leather that's black up here with our logo embossed, and a stainless steel drop rig. One of the reasons for that is partly because I think it looks cool and it's very different, but one of the reasons is stainless steel isn't going to deflect and fatigue. Now, Kydex being used for this component is definitely a functional solution, but we didn't want the possibility of fatigue. Now, this is actually a component that sees a lot more fatigue than what I had originally thought. And in testing this design, I realized that quickly before deciding to go with the stainless. And that reason is when you have the knife in sheath and you're pulling on it, this stainless is pushing up to the bottom of your belt. And when you pull, that rigidity of that stainless steel is what keeps the sheath down as you eject the knife. So if you have something that's liable to fatigue, as you pull on that knife, oftentimes the sheath is sort of separating and then you're pulling. And so that's actually quite a bit of repeated fatigue just from pulling the knife out. But even possibly worse than that is when you have a knife handle off of your belt like this and you're walking through woods like this, if you have a limb behind this handle and it pulls the knife away from you, that fatigue that's possible by bending like this is something that I really wanted to reinforce. So going with stainless steel that is just quite thick and is not going to fatigue. I pretty much bet my life that this stainless steel is not going to fail in this application. And then also leather that is very durable and thick and not liable to fail either. It just means you're not going to lose your knife, because if you got a bunch of gear on in a pack and the knife finds a way to fatigue and eventually break even in these small corners, then the knife may fall off and you may not notice. So we wanted that to be extremely secure. So that is a very unique feature, I think, to the knife here that we've implemented, and we had these custom made. These are a product specifically from us, this drop rig. And then from there, I'd like to point out that the sheath has standard hole spacing. If there's any other thing like a tech lock or something that you'd want to put on it, that is an option, of course. And we have a small eyelet here at the very top, because one of the things I'm not a fan of is if a sheath doesn't have something retaining the top here, you can get a thumb pinch. Whereas when the knife comes out, if that wants to open up on the thumb side of the sheath, and then when the knife ejects, it closes back up and it can pinch your thumb. So this small eyelet is a anti-pinch feature, and the reason it's small is if it was a full-size eyelet, then the entire sheath would have to be larger to accommodate that eyelet being in that position next to the handle there. So we have the normal 1/4 inch eyelets down here for all your accessories, and the smaller one for anti-pinch right there. Now, in addition, this sheath features a very, very stiff retention. It glides in and out, but you'll be able to hear this click. Super, super positive. It's either all the way in or it's not. I mean, you can absolutely hear that. And that's something we played with a lot. I mean, this sheath, I might have spent more time on the fit of this sheath than on almost any other aspect of the knife. I really wanted it right, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. So that is the LT5 sheath. It is vacuum formed, and that gives us really good definition, which helps a lot with limiting rattle. So we don't have any rattle. The sheath actually has a large well where the blade can go in to prevent scratching of the blade, but then right where it reaches the tip, the sheath becomes tight at the very last little bit, so that as the knife's going in, it has lots of free play. You can hear it there, which is going to prevent as much scratching as possible. And then as soon as it parks at the end, the tip kind of wedges into that last little bit, which is why the tip wiggle is mitigated almost completely on these knives. So such a big knife with a heavy handle that you can move and it doesn't rattle, that is something we wanted to accomplish with this. One of the most notable things about the LT5 is the price. Now, it is the biggest knife we've made here at Schwarz Knives, and it's also the most affordable knife in our catalog. We made very specific decisions about the materials and the way we would handle them and the way they would move through the shop so that this knife could be as efficient as possible. It's the first knife we launched in our new shop. We moved in and we're able to expand some of our assembly areas and organizational abilities so that this could be that affordable. It is in my mind, it is a good value. I really am happy with how this turned out with that price point. It's $195 and it is available on our site. We do carry them in stock. That's pretty much it for today, guys. If you have any questions about this knife, definitely ask in the comments. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and we will have more videos coming. I've got this beautiful spot. I don't know why I haven't been using it. Been trying to use the shop. It's too loud. So, of course, you can hear a truck go by right when I say that, but maybe I could get a little further in the woods next time. But appreciate you guys. Thanks for stopping by.